Hello fellow cinephiles, Film Dude here, thanks for joining me today. So today I'll be looking at the new Scream 7. Now I know there's been a bit of controversy around this, the first reviews of it haven't been very positive, with a 48% Rotten Tomato score. I don't particularly look into those particular scores because it's based on only a handful of reviews, but anyway. I think people are being a bit harsh on it, to be honest. I really enjoyed it. I definitely think this is the best sequel we've had since the second film, and I know that's saying a lot. I've enjoyed 3, 4, 5 and 6. I think 5 and 6 were solid. 6 I really enjoy a lot. And this kind of feels like it's in that little bit of the realm of the sixth one, but it also is a return back to the original film. Like the fact that Kevin Williamson not only co-writes this script once again, but also is behind the camera this time as director. And I think he brings such a nostalgic aspect to the film. He brings back a sort of Wes Craven-esque look and feel, which I really loved. And this is definitely a film that I guess is going to cause issues with people. I know there's sort of people still upset with what happened to Melissa Barrera in being fired, and the pivot that they did to create a film after that, and how people are still really upset about that. And I think that is clouding people's opinion or interest in this particular movie. But look, we're all entitled to our own opinion. If you don't like it, you don't like it. But for me, I really enjoyed it. Now, for those who haven't seen it, it's going to be a spoiler-free review, the best I can do. I am going to go into certain aspects, but I'm going to try my best not to spoil anything for people who are interested in going to see this movie. So the story itself, we find Sydney Prescott, known as Sydney Evans now, and she's living a simple life in a small town, not unlike Woodsboro, Pine Grove. She's married to a police chief and has 3 children. Now, one of them's a teenager, Tatum, played by Isabella May, and it really looks at the life that she's living and how that's slowly interrupted with the appearance once again of Ghostface, trying to ultimately bait her back into the limelight in a certain aspect. And it's really about the relationship between Sydney and her daughter, and how Sydney's past is having an impact on her daughter, for her daughter knowing who as a person. And it's really about their relationship and how these ghost killings sort of bring certain things from the past to light and show that the relationship that they have is important, and that Sydney can't run from her past and can't hide it from her daughter because it puts her at a disadvantage due to what transpires in this film. Straight off the bat, I really love the opening sequence. No, it's not on par, in my opinion, to the original film or the sequel's openings, with Casey Becker getting killed and the ultimately cinema sequence in the second film. But it's really solid. It really puts us back into that world in an interesting way. And I think that's what the whole film really is about. It's about putting us back into the situation, revisiting this particular world, and how it relates back to the original films rather than later sequels we got with 5 and 6, and it really returns to the Sydney story. The opening was really clever and really well done, and I like a lot of the ideas in it, and I think there's a lot of the kills throughout the film are really brutal and intense, and I like that. And it feels like a great balance between old and new in returning characters for one, but also the way that the film's done. It feels sort of back traditional to the first film. It's much more scarier and intense than the later sequels would kind of be, besides 6. And it also feels like what they do with 6 in a lot of ways. I like how they go about the particular story. We meet Tatum and her friends, and there's something reminiscent of the original film, and I think that's what a lot of people dislike in this film, is this nostalgia aspect to it. But I really like that. I really love the original Screams. I think Scream 4, 5 and 6 are fine. They all have great aspects that I enjoy. 6 is missing Sydney, so that sort of feels a bit different because of that. Where this feels like we're returning back to the beginning, and we're looking at it through the perspective of a much older Sydney, and seeing her daughter at the age she was when everything transpired for her in the events of the original film, and what transpires for Tatum in this film. And their relationship is the core and the heart of the whole movie, in my opinion, and it's really all about that. There are some really great sequences in the film, like I mentioned, the opening. There's a scene that takes place in a high school on stage, which I really liked as well. There's some great moments throughout where Tatum's being chased, and just about how her and Sydney work together to sort of survive the interaction they have with Ghostface. Ghostface feels much more intense here. There's some really cool sequences where Ghostface is hiding in particular places and appears. And just sort of how they sort of unfold the story is really interesting. The new characters we meet, Tatum's friends, are interesting enough, played by really solid actors. And we do get some returning characters from the previous film and also from the earlier films as well. And the way they go about revealing one particular aspect of a returning character, I think it's really good. It does something different. It sets up this idea of who this character is. Character may or may not be there, and I like that. I like the way they went about that. And I like the opening with, as you've seen, people seeing from the trailer, the burning down of the house. I like that. I thought that was the idea of like, so let's burn it all down to start anew. But I just felt like that and the ending and who the killer reveal is didn't connect in a way I think it could have and should have. And that's the other gripe as well, is the particular Ghostface in this, the reveal at the end. I'm not sure how I feel about it. And the choices why this particular Ghostface is doing what they're doing. It doesn't it's not it doesn't jive, it just didn't click with me the way I expected because of the fact of the beginning and the tie-in I really wanted, and the sort of aspect of a returning character and what they could have really done with that. I think Neve Campbell's really wonderful in this. It's good to see her return to a series and working with someone she worked with 30 years ago in the first film. And just how the events of what transpired for her throughout the films, and how her life has been impacted by that, and how she wants to keep it all private and protected. And she doesn't really want to divulge those certain information to her daughter because she feels she's trying to keep her safe, and this will keep her safe. But like I mentioned at the start, this put us at a bit of a disadvantage. And I think the exploring of this particular mother and daughter, and this sort of reveal of the killer at the end, the killer at the end kind of feels like a catalyst for the whole film, but also of Sydney returning to looking at her past and not hiding it anymore from the people that she loves, because it starts to have effect. And that because of this, it creates a stronger bond between her and her daughter. Her daughter is exposed to the things that Sydney went through in a brutal way, and she has to rise to become the hero in this particular story. But it's really about their sort of interaction and their relationship. Obviously, we have, besides Neve Campbell coming back, we've got Courtney Cox, who appears in a great way, and also Mindy and Chad reappear as well in a really interesting way. They're not only used the way I think they could have been, but it is good to see them. And it's a way of bridging the old and the new together. And there has been a lot of talk of previous actors who've played Ghostface before reappearing, and the way they go about that, I think, sort of works as well. It addresses certain technologies that are around now, and it also is a real nostalgic throwback to the first film, set in a small town with the events unfolding. The only difference is it is aimed at Sydney, but it's really her daughter's journey and her subsequent journey because of that. He's fantastic. Sydney's kind of really badass in this. She's tough and strong, doesn't take anybody's shit, throws herself in the mix, and isn't fearful of confronting or going head to head with Ghostface. And there's a strength in her. And the relationship she has with her husband, Mark, there's a strength in that as well, as he's a strong character. And it sort of makes sense why they're together. I thought the death scenes were much more gorier and more intense, and the whole overall feel and tone of the film felt scarier, as you weren't quite sure what was going to happen next. There are many death scenes I liked. The opening is a scene where Sydney and her family get attacked in the house, which is good. And the third act I kind of liked as well, the one that unfolds, and certain scenes in that as well. I think, I know people are upset with what happened to Melissa getting fired and the direction they're originally going to take this film, and how they kind of had to pivot, and that Kevin had to return and sort of shape it into something else. And I can understand people's frustration, sadness at that, as it was unfair of what Paramount did. But in my opinion, I like what they did. I know it was a tough situation, and it would have been interesting to see Melissa return and what they were going to do with Scream 7 after the 5 and 6. In my opinion, I'm glad they kind of went this direction. just because I'm a huge fan and it's a return to something that feels familiar. Yes, it does feel like familiar ground, and a lot of people are upset about that. But what do you expect from a Scream film? That feels like it is trying to return to something that, as it feels like it's returning back to the beginning. But I like that. I have this sort of thing about sequels to franchises like this. I try to take them as they are and go along the journey with the characters. And the Scream series has never really been disappointing, with 3 and 4 not being the strongest part of the series, but I've never really been disappointed by it. And I just go with how it unfolds. Like I said, like, I'm a big fan, and the original 2 films I love the most, and it's cool that this sort of takes us back to that sort of era and time and does it in a creative way. And I think Kevin at the helm does a fantastic job of really crafting something interesting that feels reminiscent of Wes Craven and just sort of has an interesting and old school vibe to it. To me, this feels like Kevin putting his feet back in the water, so to speak, in this sort of regard, as he hasn't been involved as a writer in the Scream series since 4, and I like his return to it. I feel this should be a trilogy with what he's doing, to be honest. And with the scores and how much money this Scream's going to make, we may not get another one. There is talk of ideas for an 8, which I know when a series gets to 8 or 9, it's a long series, but there's just something about it. I kind of want Kevin to sort of be able to make the films he wanted to make. So he had these ideas for how he wanted to do 4 and the continuation of 4, and there's other ideas of where he wanted Stu to come back and be part of there was a cult around him. I wanted those movies, and I was expecting this to be that, and it is in certain aspects, but not everything that I wanted. But I feel this film, while it's nostalgic and reminiscent of that, of the original movie, I think that's his way of putting his feet back in the water and testing it out. And I feel if we was able to do a next film, that would be a departure a little bit from what he did with this. And I would like to see another one. And I would like to see a new direction for the series to go in and sort of combine what it done previous, but also take in a completely different direction. And I think Kevin's the man for that. Really, to me, what this film is talking about and really looking at is trauma. It's looking at the effects that trauma has on the person who goes for this particular event, but also how that trickles down and can start to affect a family and the relationships between a family. That person may not want to relive this and may not want to expose their children to it or their partner, but by doing that, you're keeping them at a distance and giving them a disadvantage in a lot of ways. Disadvantage in a lot of ways, so they don't really know what the person's been through. And I think this film addresses that quite well. When we first meet Sydney, she doesn't want to talk about anything. She's even changed her last name, and she's living in a small town. She's dropped off the map. People know who she is, and she still is in the limelight, so to speak. And people in the town know who she is, but she's trying to live a simple and quiet life. And obviously, once Ghostface comes in, that throws it up into chaos. But it's about her addressing the past, and it's about accepting things, and it's about sort of shaping the direction she wants to go in. Much like 3, where she goes up into the mountains to hide and no one knows her name and no one knows where she is. This film kind of does that a little bit as well. Like that previous film, she's exposed once again to the world and she goes back into it. And I think that's what this film really is about. It's about trauma and the effects of trauma, not only on Sydney and her family, but also other characters within the movie and the motivation behind who Ghostface is in this particular film. Overall, I had a fun time with this. I had a smile on my face the whole time. It felt nostalgic and it felt like it transported me back to a time that I really loved when I first got into the slasher genre. And I think this pays homage to that in such a great way. People talk about how it's lost its spark, it's wearing thin. Well, part of that is going to happen, particularly with a series that has now 7 movies. So that's kind of expected to feel like that, but I think people are being a bit harsh toward the film and should give it a bit more of a chance. After watching it, I couldn't stop thinking about it, and I'm even contemplating seeing it again. But that could come down to the fact that the Scream world is one of my favourite things, it's one of my favourite franchises, and it's a series I return to time and time again. So that's sort of it. That's my review for Scream 7. I'd love to get into more detail and really get into breaking down particular things, and I may do that in the future review, with the spoiler review, after I may see this film again. For now, I enjoyed it. I'd watch it again. I'd buy it when it comes out. And I do recommend people to go and see it and give it more of a chance than you usually would, with all the horror that we have now and all the evolution of horror and all the things that transpired and not having the Scream film that they intentionally really wanted. But I think it's worth checking out. Anyway, that's it. That's my review today. Thanks for joining me today. If you enjoyed this video, hit subscribe down the bottom. Follow me on Letterboxd and Facebook. Otherwise, until next time, enjoy the movies.